There was a man who had a dream of creating the world's best dessert. He spent years honing his skills to compete in the biggest competition. He led his team to create a beautiful phoenix made of sugar, and everyone already thought he had won the competition. Unfortunately, his life was cut short when his own dessert fell on top of him. In his last breath, he started to regret how his life ended. He wanted to fulfill his dreams, but God was unjust. However, God had other plans for him and decided to reincarnate him in another world. He was born as Milmertine, the son of a noble general. Despite being a noble, his father always did his best to help his people and taught Mil the importance of being kind to others. At the age of 9, Mil was already trained by his father to become a great swordsman. Despite not being the best and wishing to become a pastry, Mil continued to practice and perfect his skills. His father went easy on him, only using one hand, but at the same time, he was rigid in his training. He taught him that letting go of the sword on a battlefield was equivalent to death. Mil followed his father with dedication, trying to parry each hit while barely swinging his sword. His eyes were filled with determination, but it wasn't with training because in Mil's mind, the biggest battle was to pick which dessert he was going to do next. Of course, that led him to lose his sword. It's not the same as using a butter knife. After training, a person came to report that it was almost time for breakfast, and the general had some reports to go through. The general wanted to hear the reports right there and then. The person told him there was good news and bad news, but the person delivering the news informed him that their bean harvest was going to be huge. Just like Mil promised them, their territory was always barren, which made it impossible for people to cultivate. But Mil used the knowledge from the other world to improve the cultivation and harvesting process of their lands. After hearing the news, Mil starts giving more tips on how to improve the cultivation and which dishes he could make, confusing his father, who doesn't even understand how his son understands so much about soil. But Mil couldn't reveal the truth that he was reincarnated. Instead, he simply brushed it off as just having crazy thoughts. However, the mood quickly changed when news arrived that 50 bandits were on the loose and headed toward their town. Mil's father was anxious, knowing the bandits would destroy the fields and ruin his plans of creating desserts. He didn't want bandits to ruin his dreams. His father wanted to know how much they had to prepare. It was only 1 month. His father wanted to gather the villagers and arm them. But Mil knew this was crazy. They would get at most 30 men in total to defend the land. And if the bandits managed to surround the place, they wouldn't be able to survive in the long term. He heard his father's conversation. They cannot ask for reinforcements because other nearby lords already lost against the bandits. And if they managed to send them and win the battle, they could use it to take the land. The conversation gets even more frustrating to Mil, who's slowly seeing the dream fading away. His father's subordinate notices it and thinks he's starting to feel the responsibility of becoming the future lord. So he suggests using their trump card, Mil. Mil's father didn't understand what he meant, but the guy explained it would be a gamble. The general always trusted his intuition and realized what he meant by the trump card, the sanctification ceremony, a ritual that will awaken Mil's magic powers. Confused, Mil had no idea what this meant. At the breakfast table, his father made a big announcement to the family. He told them that Mil was going to undergo a sanctification ceremony, similar to the coming-of-age ceremony in their world. Although it's traditionally meant for 13 to 15-year-olds, Mil's father believed he deemed it fit. He already had good enough swordsmanship skills, and he also was already very intelligent. Mil's mother was initially upset because she wanted him to have more time as a child, but she eventually came around and helped him prepare for the ceremony. His mother ends up accepting the decision, but first, she wanted to prepare him. She asked for Mil's sister, and the two started to smile at him like creeps. Mil knew he was doomed. He had to face the biggest shame of his life, cross-dressing. And his father simply ignored his call for help, the equivalent of going out to buy milk in this world. Cross-dressing was humiliating for him, but he had to go through with it. They even decided to put makeup on his face. At this point, he just looked like a clown. After 3 days of suffering, it was finally time to go to the royal capital and complete the ritual. His friends were cheering him on and giving him the courage he needed. His father then put his hand on his shoulder and started to chant a spell. The air around them was filled with energy, and in a split second, they were teleported to the capital. Mill was fascinated by the sights and all the ingredients he could use in his desserts. Despite his curiosity, Mill was reminded by his father that he could only buy anything he wanted if he passed the ceremony. He even discovered a new fruit called bonkas, which had a sour taste. He wanted to buy them and try to grow them in their territory, which impressed his father, who thought Mill wanted to develop the territory and create an army. But as you can guess, this guy only thinks about making his desserts. When they arrived at the church, they met with the panda priest. His father wanted Mill to perform the sanctification ceremony to get his magical abilities. This ceremony involved both physical and mental challenges. First, they measured the magic power by restraining the person and making them drink a bitter drink. They then left them alone in complete darkness without any senses. Usually, kids start screaming after a few minutes, but Mill was different. He spent the whole time thinking about creating new desserts. His mind was filled with ingredients and recipes. His father and the panda priests couldn't even believe it. 2 days later, Mill found himself surrounded by golden light particles that got absorbed into his body. His father and the panda priest couldn't even believe in his magic potential. They woke him up and took him to the last part of the ritual. The priest was about to read a scripture, and if Mill had successfully gained magical abilities, he would be able to comprehend its meaning. As the panda began to read, Mill suddenly understood. The scripture was magic itself. His father noticed that everything went smoothly, and on their way back home, just as promised, they stopped at the market for Mill to pick out his bonkas. He took his sweet time choosing them and was even given a free one by the kind shopkeeper. 3 weeks had passed, and the entire town was now bracing and making preparations for the upcoming bandit siege. The nearby villages had already been attacked, and they were preparing to attack Mill's land. He had been assigned to help with the defense preparations, and he was eager to lend a hand. He knew that their army was made up of farmers, making them weak and vulnerable. They needed to come up with a strategy and fast. They created a huge defense wall, filled up the wells, and sealed the small villages. They didn't want the bandits to make a base there. The villagers then were going to hide in the biggest village. Defeat was almost certain. They didn't have enough men, and their food could only last 3 days. Lost in thought, Mill was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of his childhood friends Mark and Lumi, who had come to help him. He thought that on a normal day, he would be playing with them, and that thought gave him a plan. He instructed them on how to gather rocks that could be used to throw at the bandits, but also warned them to stay away from danger. As Mark and Lumi were collecting the rocks, they suddenly heard a strange sound. It was the bandits heading straight for their village. They ran back and alerted about the danger. The general then gave the order for the villagers to fight for their lives and protect their homes. The villagers started to panic, afraid they couldn't stop them. Mill's father stepped in to give his speech. Every villager grew some balls of courage and decided they won't let them take their land. The general knew the bandits were going to strike at night, so he started to design where his men would be. The general's retainer was worried about the plan, but they asked Mill for his opinion. Imagine trusting a 9-year-old in a battle to death. And guess what? Not only he's a 9-year-old, but he's also a pastry chef. This kid is comparing his recipes to a full battle, like measuring ingredients when baking can be compared to knowing your enemy's supplies. And guess what? The general agrees with the kid because why not? The general grasped this concept and went off on horseback to scout the area. This allowed them to surprise the bandits and strike first. Meanwhile, Mill was charged with safeguarding the village in the general's absence. He sought out Mark and Lumi to convey the message to signal the attack with fire arrows. Lumi was afraid of potentially harming the general, but Mill remained confident that his father would use them as a guide to come back if he was being chased. He knew his father was intentionally baiting the bandits into a brief and definitive clash with a hidden agenda to gather the children. Although it may seem unacceptable to involve children in a battle, Mill knew that it was necessary to buy them time. Meanwhile, the general was out scouting and spotted the resources of the bandits. They had 70 men, 5 good horses, and some captives from previous villages. It was a good sign that they did not carry many provisions. With his magic abilities, the general went straight into battle, doing his best to decrease the enemy numbers in a quick swoop. A few bandits were down. The bandit leader was smart, he gave good instructions and stopped the attack. Without many options, the general decided to retreat instead of attacking again. The bandits saw this as an opportunity and gathered their horses to pursue them. But they made two big miscalculations. The first was that they did not notice the trap set by the villagers. The second was that they never expected the supposedly leaderless village to have the mightiest leader of them all. The general spotted the fire arrows and immediately recognized Mill's plan. Mill was guiding his father to come back while also giving their location to the enemy. His father knew their current location and which path to take in order to reduce the damage to the fields. As the bandits drew nearer to the village, Mill gave the order to a bunch of kids to launch a full-on attack with slingshots. The bandits never expected to be hit by a mix of fire rocks right on their faces. They began to flee in panic, but the flames consumed them before they could escape. But the bandits were unable to escape the wrath of the children. Just a few hours earlier, Mill had gathered all the children and explained the plan. He knew that his father would leave the bandits on a chase, so he created a strategy to attack the bandits from their flank, which was their weak point. By using the children, they were able to outnumber the bandits and use their slingshots to great effect. His father and the retainers joined this ambush by attacking the bandits, reducing their forces even more. But the bandit leader didn't give up. He managed to parry the rock and climb up the wall. He quickly killed a farmer and challenged the rest. The peasants surrounded him, but he was more experienced in battle. The leader of the bandits ordered everyone to be killed, and the full-on fight began. The bandits tried to take on the villagers and the general's retainers, while the kids still did their best to throw rocks. This annoyed the bandit leader. He ran toward the kids and attacked them. The leader went for the kids while the rest fought against villagers and retainers. The kids couldn't move their legs, and soon blood was splattered on the floor. Mill managed to push the kid away and got hit in the shoulder. The bandit leader used him as a hostage, and Mill used the chance to order the kids to hide. Mill saw a dead man lying on the ground and quickly thought he could use him to his advantage. The man had his head burnt from the rocks, and Mill used his magical ability to copy the injury to the other bandits. They, too, started to feel their heads burning, causing confusion among the bandits and their leader. Mill then used the same spell on the leader, who set him free. The bandit leader could not understand what was going on and got hit by a rock just as he was about to ask if Mill was a wizard. "Not really, bro,"